If you take a look at the last 20 years of electronic drums, there's one trend that really stands out. Electronic drums have slowly gotten larger and larger with every new generation that comes out. And we've gotten to the point now where there's a ton of companies that specialize in making full-sized, acoustic-looking electronic drums. Now there's a couple of reasons why I like this trend. Number one, full-sized acoustic electronic drum sets look like actual drum sets, because they are. The second reason why I like this is that it's way easier to jump back and forth between acoustic and electronic if you have identical setups and identical sized shells. If you do want to get into this kind of electronic drum set, you basically have two main options. You're going to have to make a choice here. Do you either build the drum set yourself out of mesh heads, triggers, and different cables, or do you buy it pre-built? So this one right here behind me is a Drums pre-built drum set. And then over here, this blue one is a DIY set. Okay, so let's start off by talking about the advantages of buying a pre-built drum set. After really thinking about this for a while and testing tons of different pre-built drum sets and also doing a lot of trigger installs, what I've come to realize is that when you buy a pre-built drum set, what you're really buying is your time back. You're buying that time back. You don't have as much frustration. You don't have to spend a couple of afternoons researching what to buy and then going and learning how to install everything. There's some drummers out there that, who knew, would rather be drumming than trying to learn how to be a technician and installing stuff. It's kind of the difference between buying a chair that's already assembled versus buying one from IKEA. Really, you're not getting better mesh heads with a pre-built drum set. You're not getting better drum triggers, really. You can buy some of the best mesh heads and some of the best drum triggers sold separately from a ton of different companies. And you're not necessarily getting better customer support because drum trigger companies will work with you to help you during the install if you run into issues. Really, what you're buying back when you buy a pre-built drum set is your time. Now, if you're buying a really simple trigger setup, like the ones that clip onto the rim from Edrum or something, all that sort of stuff takes zero time to install. But if you go out and buy the legit drum triggers, the ones that have multiple, cross beams that go to different lugs and stuff, that sort of install does take time. I've also run into certain instances where a certain kind of drum shell had a weird bevel on the inside of the snare, so it wasn't working well with a drum trigger I was trying to install. There are some issues that you could potentially run into. You also get the confidence that a professional has installed the triggers for you. People that have built hundreds of drums before will be building your drum set. The confidence that goes along with that, and the fact that it has already been tested at the factory or the store that it was built at. That's just something that really appeals to some drummers out there. Now, I'm not trying to blow up the install process to be, scarier than it actually is. If you can take a desk from IKEA and put it together, you can put a drum trigger inside of an electronic drum. They have instructions, they have install videos. The company will do the stuff necessary to make sure that you can install their triggers. Okay, so jumping over to the DIY side, what are the advantages of buying the parts separate and installing everything yourself? The biggest advantage that I can really see is the fact that it is significantly cheaper to buy and install those parts yourself. Now, of course, how much money you're going to save is going to be dependent on you. If you buy the very best mesh heads and the very best drum triggers and the very best drum shells and the very best cables to connect it all together, it's still going to be expensive. But if you take an equivalent DIY drum set and an equivalent pre-built drum set, they're going to be a lot different in price. That's all I'm saying. Now, the second advantage of building the drum set yourself is the fact that you can mix up what brands that you're using. Usually when you buy a pre-built drum set, everything is from that one manufacturer, but when you build the drum set yourself, you can find your favorite mesh head and your favorite drum trigger and your favorite rims and your favorite cables. So there's an advantage of mixing up different brands. The third advantage of doing it on your own is the fact that you decide exactly what kind of drum set that you're going to convert into electronic. You can get the exact looking shells that you want. Now, the conversion drum companies are really good about this too. They'll print whatever kind of drum wrap you want for it, and some of them will let you choose birch or maple shells or whatever like that. They'll have a lot of options, but if you want every option there is, then doing it yourself will give you more flexibility. And of course, the last thing that you're getting from building the drum set yourself is the pride that comes from actually doing the work and building it yourself. You know that you're the one that made this drum set happen, and it just feels cool to know that. Okay, so we've talked about the pros and cons of building the drum set yourself versus buying a pre-built drum set. Now let's talk about which is better for the average drummer out there. The best way to look at this, at least in my point of view, if you have under $2,000, build the drum set yourself. If you have over $2,000, you might as well just go buy a pre-built drum set. Pre-built drum sets are more expensive than most people think. The very cheapest ones out there will start at maybe $1,000. That's for kick, snare, and then 3 toms. In addition to that, you're going to have to go buy the cymbals and a drum module. So you've already spent $2,000 by the time you bought a pre-built drum set on the lower end of the spectrum. And if you buy the more expensive pre-built drum sets, like an ATV Edrums kit, which is awesome, by the way, I've recommended that to a lot of people in around the $3,000 to $4,000 range, or a drum tech kit, which costs like $3,000 to $10,000. Rule of thumb, if you have under $2,000, I would build the drum set yourself. If you have a budget over $2,000, then maybe look at buying a pre-built drum set because, it's less work. And if you got that much money lying around, then your time might be worth more than the time it takes to install this stuff in the first place. A couple of last things to mention. The first is that if you buy really cheap drum heads and really cheap drum triggers, you're not going to get that great of a result. A lot of people go buy a really cheap clip-on drum trigger and a Remo silent stroke drum head and wonder why it doesn't react quite as well as a Roland PDX 100 or something. It's because if you buy the cheap stuff, it's not going to perform as good as the expensive stuff. So you still have to go and look for the nice drum triggers and the nice mesh heads to get the best result. And the other half of the battle is making sure that your settings are right inside of the drum module. You can buy really expensive drum triggers and install them correctly, but if you don't have the right trigger settings inside of your drum module, it's not going to perform as well as it should. So installing it right, getting the good stuff is half the battle, and then the other half of the battle is making sure you have the right trigger settings inside of the drum module. I have videos on that too if you need to learn how to do that as well. And of course, every company will have their own manual and suggestions on how to set everything up. So let me know what you guys think about this whole topic. Which is better, doing it yourself versus buying a pre-built drum set? Really want to know your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, and a special shout out to the people on Patreon who helped make this channel possible. You're the real MVPs. See you guys in a few.